It was a gilded cage, marble house, a mansion meant to symbolize the pinnacle of luxury. But behind its marble facade, a daughter was imprisoned. Her mother, desperate for a royal marriage, locked her away to secure her place in history. The whispers of society hid the ugly truth, as the world marvelled at the opulence surrounding them. What price would a mother pay for legacy? And what cost would her daughter endure for the dream of royalty? The house stood silent, its walls holding secrets darker than its golden walls could ever show. The summer of 1888 arrived in Newport, Rhode Island with salt-thick air and impossible expectations. Alva Vanderbilt had a vision, not just a house, a statement, a declaration of power wrapped in 500 tons of white marble imported directly from the quarries of Italy. She would build something that made even the old money families of New York society stop and stare. Her husband, William Kissam Vanderbilt, had the fortune, $60 million from his grandfather's railroad empire. More money than most could comprehend. But money alone didn't buy respect in the brutal hierarchy of America's upper class. Alva understood this. She was born Alva Smith in Mobile, Alabama. Southern aristocracy fallen on hard times after the Civil War. She knew what it meant to have lineage without wealth. She married into the Vanderbilt fortune in 1875, but the old guard still whispered behind gloved hands. New money, railroad money, tainted, so she would force them to acknowledge her. Marble House would be her weapon. She hired Richard Morris Hunt, the first American architect trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He had already designed the Vanderbilt summer cottage called Ochre Court. But this would be different. This would be a temple to her own ambition. Hunt drew inspiration from the Petit Trianon at Versailles, that small palace where Marie Antoinette once played at being a shepherdess while France starved. The irony was lost on no one, least of all Alva. Construction began in 1888. The foundation alone required months of preparation. The site sat on Bellevue Avenue, prime real estate overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Workers excavated tons of earth. They laid stone upon stone, building the base that would support Alva's dreams. The marble came by ship. Block after block of pure white stone, each piece numbered and catalogued. Italian craftsmen travelled across the ocean to cut and shape it according to Hunt's exacting specifications. They spoke little English. They worked with their hands, transforming cold stone into columns and archways that echoed ancient Rome. The cost climbed. $11 million by the time the last chandelier was hung. In today's terms, over $300 million for a summer cottage used only 3 months each year. But Alva didn't count the cost in dollars. She counted it in power. The house rose from the earth like a monument. 2 stories of gleaming marble with a facade that seemed more suited to a government building than a private residence. Massive Corinthian columns flanked the entrance. Every window, every cornice, every decorative element was carefully calculated to project dominance. Inside, Hunt created rooms that stunned even the most jaded visitors. The gold room blazed with gilding so thick it seemed to pulse with its own light. The ceiling featured elaborate rococo ornamentation. The walls were covered in gold-embossed leather. 3 massive mirrors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, multiplying the brilliance until the room felt like standing inside a jewellery box. The Gothic room served as Alva's personal retreat. Here, dark carved wood replaced gold. Medieval tapestries hung on walls panelled in walnut. The fireplace bore the Vanderbilt crest, as if William's grandfather had been some European duke rather than a ferry operator who happened to build an empire. But the library revealed something darker. Alva designed it herself. She chose every detail. The room stretched 50 feet long, with walls lined in dark Circassian walnut. The ceiling reached 15 feet high. Windows looked out toward the Atlantic, but heavy curtains could seal the room completely. It was beautiful. It was suffocating. It was where a mother's love would curdle into control. Alva had 3 children, William Jr., Harold, and Consuelo. Born in 1877, Consuelo was named after Alva's childhood friend, Consuelo Isnaga, who had married a British duke. That marriage planted the seed. If Consuelo Isnaga could become the Duchess of Manchester, why couldn't Alva's own daughter reach even higher? From the moment Consuelo could understand words, Alva shaped her for one purpose: marriage into European nobility. Not just any title, not some minor baron or impoverished count, a duke, an heir to vast estates and ancient lineage. Consuelo grew up beautiful, dark hair, delicate features, a long neck that gave her an aristocratic bearing even as a child. She was intelligent, speaking French fluently by age 10. She played piano. She painted watercolours of flowers and seascapes. She was everything a mother could want, except willing. Consuelo fell in love with Winthrop Rutherford, tall, handsome, athletic. From an old New York family with impeccable credentials, they met during the summer season in Newport. He was older, confident, attentive. He listened when she spoke about books and art. He didn't see her as a commodity to be traded. He saw her as a person. Alva saw him as a threat. Rutherford had money, but not enough. He had breeding, but no title. He represented everything Alva had spent years rejecting. Comfort without glory. American stability without European prestige. When Consuelo was 18, Alva made her intentions clear. There would be no marriage to Rutherford. There would be no discussion. Consuelo would marry the Duke of Marlborough, Charles Spencer Churchill, ninth holder of one of England's most prestigious titles. The Duke needed money. His estate at Blenheim Palace was crumbling. The roof leaked. The grounds had fallen into disrepair. 200 rooms echoed with the ghosts of former glory. He required an American heiress with enough fortune to restore his inheritance. Alva needed a title. The arrangement was perfect. Except for one small problem, Consuelo said no. But Alva had built Marble House for this moment. Every marble column, every gold-leafed ceiling, every carefully curated room had one purpose: to create a setting worthy of a woman whose daughter would become a duchess. She would not be denied. What happened next would transform Marble House from a symbol of achievement into a monument of cruelty. The summer of 1895 should have been Consuelo's moment of happiness. Instead, it became her prison sentence. Winthrop Rutherford proposed. Not officially, not with Alva's blessing, but in the way two people in love understand commitment without ceremony. They planned to elope. They would leave Newport, marry quietly, present their families with a fait accompli that couldn't be undone. Alva discovered the plan. What she did next revealed the woman behind the marble facade. She locked Consuelo in her bedroom, not metaphorically, not through social pressure or emotional manipulation, though those came too. Physically locked her inside a room in Marble House, while the Duke of Marlborough was summoned from England to finalise the marriage arrangements. The room was on the second floor overlooking the gardens Alva had landscaped with geometric precision. French doors led to a small balcony, but Alva stationed servants in the garden below with orders to report any attempt at escape. The bedroom door was locked from the outside. Meals were brought on trays. Consuelo was allowed no visitors. No letters went out. No messages came in. The marble walls that looked so elegant from the street became barriers. The ocean view became a cruel reminder of freedom that existed just beyond reach. The house Alva built to showcase her triumph became Consuelo's cell. Days passed. A week. Then 2. Alva sent doctors to examine her daughter. Not for physical illness, but to certify mental instability should Consuelo continue refusing the marriage. In the 1890s, a young woman could be declared hysterical, confined to an asylum, lose all rights to inheritance and freedom. Alva made sure Consuelo understood this possibility. She brought in lawyers to explain exactly what would happen if Consuelo persisted in her defiance. Her trust fund would be frozen. She would be cut off completely, left without resources or support. In an era when women couldn't vote, couldn't own property in their own names in many states, couldn't work in most professions, financial abandonment meant destitution, but the cruelest weapon was emotional. Alva told Consuelo that her father was gravely ill. Heart problems, stress-induced. The doctor said he might not survive. The cause of his deterioration, the scandal, the shame, the ungrateful daughter who refused to fulfill her duty to the family. It was a lie. William Kissam Vanderbilt was perfectly healthy. But Consuelo had no way to verify the truth. She sat in her locked room, watching servants tend the gardens below, and believed she was killing her father through disobedience. The Duke arrived in August. Charles Spencer Churchill was 23 years old, slender, moustached, carrying himself with the casual arrogance of inherited nobility. He had been Duke of Marlborough for only 3 years since his father's death. He understood his duty. Blenheim Palace required $2.5 million in immediate repairs. His annual income couldn't cover even basic maintenance. He needed Consuelo's fortune. She would bring $10 million, $3 million paid immediately at marriage, the rest in trust generating $400,000 annually. He didn't need to love her. He needed her money. The negotiations happened in Marble House's reception rooms while Consuelo remained locked upstairs. Alva and the Duke's representatives worked out every detail. The prenuptial agreement alone ran to 50 pages. It specified exactly how Consuelo's money would be transferred, when, under what conditions. It protected the Duke's rights to the fortune even in the event of divorce. It said nothing about Consuelo's rights, because she had none. The wedding date was set for November 6th, 4 months away. Enough time for Alva to orchestrate a ceremony worthy of international attention. Consuelo was allowed out of her room only under supervision. She took walks in the garden with her mother beside her, speaking in urgent whispers about duty and family, and the sacrifices required of those born into privilege. She sat through dinners where the Duke was present, making stilted conversation about English weather and American customs. She wrote letters to Winthrop Rutherford that were never sent. Alva intercepted them all. She read each one, studying her daughter's desperate words. Then she used them. She told Consuelo that Rutherford had moved on, was courting someone else, had never truly loved her. More lies, but effective ones. By September, Consuelo's will began to crack, not because she accepted the marriage, but because she saw no escape. The doors were locked, the servants were loyal to Alva, her father was supposedly dying, her beloved was supposedly gone. The world beyond Marble House had become unreachable. The house itself seemed to conspire in her imprisonment. Its thick marble walls blocked sound. Screaming brought no help. The gold room where Alva entertained guests was at the opposite end of the mansion from Consuelo's room. Visitors toured the public spaces, admiring the opulence, never knowing a young woman was being held captive upstairs. The Gothic room, with its dark wood and medieval tapestries, took on sinister meaning. It had always been meant to evoke ancient European castles. Now it felt like a torture chamber, all that. History of power-crushing individual will. The library where Alva spent her mornings became the war room. She kept ledgers there, tracking every detail of the upcoming wedding. Guest lists, seating arrangements, music selections, the menu for the reception. She managed Consuelo's imprisonment with the same meticulous attention she had applied to Marble House's construction. Every detail had to be perfect, even the broken daughter. Other wealthy families watched with interest. The Astors, the Belmonts, the Livingstons. They understood what Alva was accomplishing. An American dollar princess marrying a duke. It was the ultimate social triumph. Their own daughters might follow. European nobility needed American money. American plutocrats needed European titles. The exchange was mutually beneficial. Except for the young women traded like commodities. But those women's feelings didn't matter. What mattered was legacy. What mattered was securing a family's place in history. What mattered was winning the brutal competition for social supremacy that defined the Gilded Age. Alva had won many battles. She had forced New York's Mrs. Astor to acknowledge the Vanderbilts through her legendary 1883 costume ball. She had built this marble palace that made dowagers gasp. She would win this battle too. Consuelo would marry the Duke. October arrived. The wedding preparations accelerated. Consuelo's gown was fitted and refitted. Brussels lace. Satin from Paris. A train 18 feet long that required 2 attendants to manage. Alva approved every detail personally. The invitations went out. 75 cards engraved with gold. Only the most prominent families received them. This would be the social event of the decade. Consuelo went through the motions. She stood for fittings. She reviewed seating charts. She practiced her vows. Her voice was flat. Her eyes were empty. The defiant young woman who had fallen in love with Winthrop Rutherford had been broken against the marble walls of her mother's ambition, but she hadn't surrendered completely. She simply learned to hide. On the surface, she became the dutiful daughter. She agreed to the marriage. She smiled at appropriate moments. She played the role Alva demanded. Inside, she was already planning her escape. Not physical, that was impossible now, but emotional. She would marry the Duke. She would fulfill her mother's dream, but she would never forgive. She would never forget. And someday, when she had the power, she would make sure the world knew what had happened inside Marble House. The prison walls were marble, but her memory would be stone. November the 6th, 1895 arrived with cold rain and grey skies. Consuelo woke in Marble House for the last time as an unmarried woman. She was 18 years old. The Duke was 23. Neither wanted this marriage. Both were trapped by circumstances, his financial, hers familial. The ceremony would take place at St. Thomas Church on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Marble House was too small for the scale of event Alva had planned. 700 guests, the entire Vanderbilt clan, the cream of New York society, representatives from European nobility, journalists from newspapers across America and England. This wedding would prove Alva's ultimate victory. Consuelo dressed in her bridal gown. The Brussels lace felt heavy. The 18-foot train dragged behind her like chains. Her veil was secured with a diamond tiara, a gift from the Duke, or more accurately, a gift purchased with her own money that would soon become his. She looked at herself in the mirror. Beautiful, they said. Regal, the perfect duchess. She saw a ghost. The morning passed in a blur. The journey from Newport to New York, the suite at the Vanderbilt mansion on Fifth Avenue where final preparations were made, Alva hovering, adjusting, perfecting. The woman who had locked her daughter in Marble House now played the role of devoted mother, beaming with pride. No one questioned the narrative. No one asked if Consuelo wanted this marriage. Young women of her class didn't marry for love. They married for family, for duty, for advantage. At least that's what everyone told themselves. The church filled, hundreds of guests. The pews were decorated with white chrysanthemums and orchids. The aisle was covered in white carpet. Everything pristine, everything perfect, everything false. William Kissam. Vanderbilt walked his daughter down the aisle. He was not dying. He had never been dying. That had been one of Alva's lies told to break Consuelo's resistance. Now he played his part in the theatre, giving away his daughter to a man she didn't love for a title that meant nothing to her. Consuelo saw faces in the crowd, friends from childhood, relatives, society matrons wearing triumph on their faces. They had attended the wedding of the decade. She saw Walter Damrosch conducting the orchestra, 60 musicians. They played Wagner, Mendelssohn, the traditional wedding marches that accompanied so many brides to their fate. She didn't see Winthrop Rutherford. He wasn't invited, but she learned later he had been there, standing outside in the rain, unable to stop the wedding, unable to watch it, simply there, bearing witness to love destroyed by ambition. The ceremony proceeded according to plan. The Bishop of New York performed the service. Consuelo spoke her vows in a voice barely above a whisper. The Duke replied in his clipped British accent. Rings were exchanged. The register was signed. Consuelo Vanderbilt became the Duchess of Marlborough, and something inside her died. The reception at the Vanderbilt mansion was lavish. Tables laden with delicacies, champagne flowing. The wedding cake stood 6 feet tall, decorated with spun sugar and fresh flowers. Guests danced in the ballroom under chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Alva moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations. She had done it. Her daughter was a duchess. The Vanderbilt name was now linked with one of England's most prestigious titles. She had transcended her railroad money origins. She had secured her place in history. The cost was irrelevant, or so she told herself. But even in that moment of triumph, cracks appeared in Alva's certainty. She saw Consuelo standing beside the Duke, mechanically smiling at guests. She saw the emptiness in her daughter's eyes. For just a moment, doubt flickered across Alva's face. Then she pushed it away. Sentiment was weakness. She had done what was necessary. Consuelo would thank her eventually. Once she lived at Blenheim Palace, once she hosted royalty, once she understood the magnitude of what had been achieved, she would see that her mother had been right. That's what Alva needed to believe. The alternative was too terrible to contemplate. The newlyweds left for their honeymoon in Europe. First Paris, then London, then finally Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire. 200 rooms of crumbling magnificence that Consuelo's fortune would restore. Alva returned to Marble House alone. William had already moved on, pursuing his own interests. Their marriage was essentially over. though divorce wouldn't come for another decade. The house stood empty except for servants. In the silence, the marble walls seemed to whisper, "Had it been worth it?" Alva walked through the gold room. The gilt still blazed. The mirrors still multiplied the light into infinity. But the room felt hollow now. All that gold couldn't fill the emptiness. She climbed the stairs to Consuelo's room. The door was unlocked now. The bed was made with fresh linens. The prison had been transformed back into a bedroom, as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Alva had achieved her goal. Her daughter was a duchess. The Vanderbilt name would be entered into Debrett's peerage. Future grandchildren would carry noble titles. The legacy was secure, but she had lost her daughter, not physically. Consuelo would write letters. She would visit occasionally. They would maintain the appearance of a normal mother-daughter relationship. But the connection was severed. The trust was destroyed. The love that had existed before Marble House became a prison had curdled into something cold and painful. In England, Consuelo settled into her new life. Blenheim Palace was enormous, cold, impersonal. The Duke was distant, pursuing his own interests. The marriage was exactly what both parties had known it would be, a transaction. Money for title. Nothing more. She fulfilled her duty. She produced 2 sons, heirs to continue the Spencer-Churchill line. She managed the vast household. She hosted weekends for the Prince of Wales. She became the perfect duchess, but she never forgot Marble House, never forgot the locked door, never forgot her mother's betrayal. Years later, she would write about it. Her memoirs, published in 1953, would finally tell the truth. The world would learn about the imprisonment, the emotional blackmail, the lies about her father's health, the letters to Winthrop Rutherford that were intercepted and destroyed. The marble facade would crack, revealing the ugliness beneath. But in 1895, the truth remained hidden. Society celebrated Alva's triumph. Newspapers wrote glowing accounts of the wedding. The union was declared a perfect match. Only 3 people knew differently. Consuelo locked in her loveless marriage, Winthrop standing in the rain outside St. Thomas Church, and Alva walking alone through the empty rooms of Marble House, wondering if victory could feel this much like defeat. The house stood on Bellevue Avenue, gleaming white marble catching the autumn light. To passers-by, it remained what it had always been, a monument to wealth and success. But monuments are cold, and marble doesn't feel regret. Alva Vanderbilt never lived in Marble House the same way again. The mansion had served its purpose. It had been the setting for her greatest triumph. It had imprisoned her daughter. It had witnessed the moment when maternal love transformed into something darker and more destructive. Now it was just a house. In 1896, barely a year after Consuelo's wedding, Alva and William finally ended their marriage. The divorce was scandalous, not because divorce was uncommon among the wealthy, but because Alva initiated it. Women didn't leave their husbands in the 1890s, especially not women who had everything society valued, but Alva had always refused to play by the rules. She divorced William, kept Marble House in the settlement, and promptly married Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont. He died in 1908, leaving her a widow at 55. She could have retreated into quiet widowhood. Instead, she became a suffragette. The woman who had once forced her daughter into marriage against her will now fought for women's rights. She used Marble House as headquarters for the National Woman's Party. She hung banners from the marble columns. She held rallies in the Gold Room. The place that symbolized her obsession with legacy became a center for women demanding their voices be heard. The irony was profound. Perhaps even Alva recognized it. She poured money into the suffrage movement, hundreds of thousands of dollars funding protests, publications, lobbying efforts. In 1920, when the 19th Amendment finally passed, giving women the right to vote, Alva was 71 years old. She had spent 2 decades fighting for women's autonomy. But she'd spent 18 years before that controlling her daughter's life with ruthless precision. Did she see the contradiction? Her later writings suggest she did. She never apologized directly, but she wrote about the pressures society placed on mothers to secure their daughters' futures. She wrote about the limited options available to women of her generation. She wrote about choices made from desperation rather than cruelty, but she never wrote about unlocking the door. Consuelo, meanwhile, endured 11 years of marriage to the Duke. She produced 2 sons, John, born in 1897, and Ivor, born in 1898. With her duty fulfilled, the marriage became even more of a shell. The Duke took mistresses openly. Consuelo found companionship with others. They maintained appearances for society while living essentially separate lives. In 1906, they separated. 5 years later, Consuelo fell in love with Jacques Balsan, a French aviator and aristocrat. She divorced the Duke in 1921 after English law finally allowed divorce for reasons beyond adultery. She married Balsan and found, at age 44, the happiness that had been denied her at 18. She lived until 1964, dying at 87. Long enough to see her memoirs published. Long enough to tell the world what happened inside Marble House. Long enough to reclaim her own story. Her account was devastating. She wrote about the locked room with precise detail. She described her mother's psychological warfare. She named the lies, the manipulations, the crushing of her will. The book became a bestseller, revealing the dark underbelly of Gilded Age marriages, but she also wrote about reconciliation. In her later years, she and Alva found a kind of peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. They were both products of their time. Alva, desperate to secure status in a society that judged women by their social achievements, Consuelo trapped by expectations she never asked for. The cycle of mother-daughter ambition and rebellion was as old as time. Marble House simply provided the setting where it played out with unusual visibility. Alva died in 1933 at age 80. She left Marble House to Frederick Vanderbilt, her late husband's nephew. He used it sporadically, then donated it to the Preservation Society of Newport County in 1963. Today, Marble House stands as a museum. Tourists walk through the gold room marvelling at the opulence. They tour the library where Alva planned her daughter's imprisonment. They see the bedrooms, the ballrooms, the service areas that made this lavish lifestyle possible. Guides tell the story now. They don't hide the darkness. They explain about Consuelo's forced marriage. They describe the literal imprisonment. They discuss the cost, not just the $11 million in construction, but the human price paid by a young woman who wanted nothing more than to marry for love. The house draws over 80,000 visitors annually. It remains one of Newport's most popular attractions. People come to see the marble, the gold, the architectural achievement, but they leave thinking about Consuelo, about Alva, about the distance between appearance and reality. The mansion that was built to project power now serves as a memorial to power's victims. That transformation tells us something important about legacy. Alva wanted to be remembered for her achievements. She wanted the Vanderbilt name elevated through her daughter's aristocratic marriage. She wanted to force society to acknowledge her through architectural magnificence. She got her wish, but not the way she intended. We remember Alva not for her triumph, but for her cruelty. We remember Marble House not as a monument to success, but as a warning about obsession. The legacy she built became exactly the opposite of what she envisioned. Legacy always carries a price. Sometimes that price is measured in money. $11 million, a staggering sum that could have fed thousands, employed thousands, improved thousands of lives. Alva spent it on marble walls and gold ceilings to impress people she disdained, but the greater price was measured in something less tangible and more permanent. Trust, love, the bond between mother and daughter, the possibility of happiness. Alva sacrificed her relationship with Consuelo on the altar of ambition. She got the Duchess she wanted, but she lost the daughter she had. Was it worth it? That question haunts Marble House still. The building itself remains beautiful. The preservation work has been meticulous. The gold room gleams as brightly as it did in 1895. The marble is pristine. Visitors can stand in the same rooms where history unfolded and imagine themselves into that vanished world. But no amount of preservation can restore what was truly lost. The years Consuelo spent locked away, the love she might have had with Winthrop Rutherford, the trust between mother and daughter that was shattered beyond repair. Those losses are permanent. They can't be polished. They can't be restored. They simply exist, embedded in the marble like fossils in stone. This is the real lesson of Marble House. Not that wealth corrupts, though it does. Not that ambition destroys, though it can. But that legacy built on broken people is hollow at its core. Alva achieved everything she wanted. Her daughter became a duchess. Her name entered the history books. Her house became an architectural landmark. She got immortality, but immortality isn't the same as meaning. Being remembered isn't the same as being respected. Leaving a legacy isn't the same as leaving something worth having. The marble walls stand witness to this truth. They were meant to project strength. Instead, they revealed brittleness. They were meant to showcase triumph. Instead, they documented tragedy. Buildings don't lie. They can't. They simply exist, holding the memories of what happened within their walls. Marble House exists now as both monument and memorial. Monument to Gilded Age excess. Memorial to the people crushed beneath that excess. When you visit today, you walk through rooms where a daughter was imprisoned by her mother. You stand in spaces where love was sacrificed for status. You witness the physical embodiment of ambition that consumed everything in its path. The beauty remains. The marble still gleams. The gold still catches the light, but beauty built on suffering carries weight. You feel it in the halls. You sense it in the silence between rooms. The house remembers, even if it can't speak. Consuelo is gone now. Alva is gone. The Duke, Winthrop Rutherford, all the players in this drama have left the stage. But Marble House remains. It outlasted them all. It outlasted the Gilded Age. It outlasted the values and assumptions that made Consuelo's imprisonment possible. It stands now as a question posed to every visitor. What are you willing to sacrifice for legacy? What price is too high? When does ambition cross the line into cruelty? The house can't answer. It can only witness. It can only hold space for reflection, and perhaps that's enough. Perhaps bearing witness is the ultimate purpose of monuments, not to celebrate victory, but to preserve truth, not to honour the powerful, but to remember those who suffered under that power. Marble House was built as a temple to one woman's ambition. It became a prison for another woman's dreams. It now stands as a reminder that the two are often inseparable. This is the legacy Alva left behind. Not triumph, not social elevation, but truth. And truth, unlike marble, cannot be shaped to our preferences. It simply is. Hard, cold, permanent. The gilded cage remains gilded, but we all know what it truly was. A cage. Marble House stands today on Bellevue Avenue, white marble gleaming against the Newport sky. Thousands walk through its doors each year, marvelling at the gold, the craftsmanship, the sheer audacity of Gilded Age excess. But beneath that beauty lies a story darker than gold, a story of ambition, control, and the price one young woman paid for her mother's dreams. What other estates hold secrets behind their elegant facades? Which mansion should we explore next? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing for more historical deep dives into America's most fascinating homes. And if you know someone who loves history's hidden stories, share this with them. Because every beautiful building has a story. Some stories inspire, some warn, and some, like Marble House, do both.